I was working as an office manager PA, and it was time for my annual review, which in truth I was actually really dreading. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd struggled to answer the question where I wanted to see myself in the next 5 years. I actually cracked a joke on the paperwork, to be honest, and said I wanted to be COO. But my manager at the time saw something different in me. I'd worked over several admin jobs across a few startups previously. I'd worn many hats, including HR. So when we sat in that meeting and when we got to the question, he looked at me and went, COO? I laughed and he said, on a serious note, I see you working in HR. You're great with people, you've got empathy, you focus in on the key details, you've got a great attention to detail. And then he offered to pay for my studies. I was gobsmacked. So I started studying my degree at 31. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to do it. I started working at 18 and he saw something in me all those years later that I didn't see in myself. And I'm truly thankful for that. That experience shaped everything about how I approach hiring today, because I know firsthand what it means when someone looks past your CV and sees your potential instead. And I've paid that forward, looking for those who may not have the immediate skill set, but they have the drive and the passion and they believe in the why of the company and they're going to help make your company successful. If you haven't watched Regina Hartley's TED Talk, Why the Best Hires Might Not Have the Most Perfect Resume, you need to. It's about 5 minutes long and I hope that when you watch it, it will change the way that you look at the CVs, resumes that cross your desk. Hartley introduces 2 types of candidates: the silver spoon, prestigious university, impressive internships, a CV resume that reads like it was designed by a career counsellor from the age of 14. And then there's the scrapper, the person with gaps in their employment, jobs that seem random, maybe a degree from a school you've never heard of, or no degree at all. And she asks a simple question: which one would you hire? Hartley cites research that people who've overcome adversity develop what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. They don't just survive difficult circumstances, they develop capabilities because of them. Resourcefulness, resilience, problem solving under pressure, adaptability when plans fall apart. The silver spoon candidate might have had every advantage, every door opened, every setback cushioned. They're often excellent hires, but the scrapper has fought for every opportunity, learned to navigate systems that weren't designed for them, figured out how to succeed without a safety net. And here's what 20 years of hiring has taught me and working in HR. When things go sideways in a startup, and they will, you want the people on your team who know how to improvise, who don't panic when resources are scarce, who can figure out things without a playbook, and that's usually your scrapper. So let's be honest about what happens when most companies hire. Someone with a degree from Cambridge and a Goldman Sachs internship gets an interview. Someone with a similar level of intelligence and drive, but a degree from a polytechnic and 3 years managing restaurants between jobs, that CV will normally get binned on the first screen. We tell ourselves we're hiring on merit, but actually we're hiring on credentials, which isn't the same thing at all. Credentials signal that someone has had access to certain opportunities. Merit is about what someone has actually done with what they had available. I've watched brilliant hires come from the most unlikely backgrounds. The person that left school at 16 to help support their family and taught themselves to code at night. The refugee who's rebuilding their entire career in a new country with a new language. The single parent who's juggling childcare and work yet delivering exceptional results. These people have capabilities that you can't teach in any MBA program. Hartley doesn't say this explicitly, but we're wired to recognize patterns. When you've seen someone with a certain profile succeed, you look for that same profile again and again and again because it feels safe. If you only hire people who look like your previous successes, you're optimizing for sameness, not for excellence. You end up with a team of people who all went to similar schools, worked at similar companies, think in a similar way, and when you hit a problem that requires a different perspective, you've got nothing. And this is where startups particularly struggle. Founders talk about wanting diverse teams and innovative thinking, then hire from the same talent pool as everybody else. Because the scrapper's resume CV doesn't fit the pattern, it raises questions and it requires somebody to take a bet. And in a competitive hiring market, it feels easier to always hire. Safe choice. Hartley suggests that we look for signs of resilience, resourcefulness, and overcoming adversity in someone's background, but she doesn't give you a playbook for how to do it in an interview. So I wanted to give you some tips. First, look at the trajectory, not the starting point. Has this person grown? Have they taken on more responsibility over time? Have they figured out how to progress even without traditional advantages? That tells you more than the first job title or university. Second, ask about obstacles. Tell me about a time when you had limited resources and still had to deliver. What's the hardest problem you've ever had to solve with no clear answer? When has a plan completely fallen apart and you've had to figure out a different way? Listen for how they think, not just what they've achieved. Third, watch for self-taught skills. Someone who taught themselves Python because they couldn't afford a boot camp. Someone who learned project management by actually managing projects, not in a classroom. Someone who developed their communication skills by having to explain technical concepts to non-technical stakeholders in different languages or even the same language. These are capabilities earned through necessity. Fourth, notice what they're proud of. Scrappers will often undersell their achievements because they don't recognize how impressive they are. I just figured it out. And it's actually them problem solving in conditions that most people couldn't handle. Fifth, trust your instinct. When someone's story doesn't fit the template, but the person impresses you anyway, that discomfort you're feeling, that's the opportunity to hire someone different from everyone you've hired before. I get asked if this is not too risky. I hear it all the time. Founders and hiring managers worrying about hiring someone without the right background. It's risky. And I always ask, riskier than what? Is it riskier than hiring someone who's never had to improvise because they've always had resources? Someone who's never failed because they've never been in a situation where failure is a real possibility? Someone who looks perfect on paper but has no experience navigating ambiguity? Startups are inherently chaotic. Resources are always constrained. Plans change constantly. The supposedly safe person from McKinsey or Google will struggle in a chaotic environment. Hartley's talk is US focused, but I've hired globally, and the silver spoon versus scrapper dynamic plays out everywhere, just with different markers. In the UK, it's Oxford versus everyone else. In India, it's IIT or IIM or nothing. In France, it's Grand Écoles. Every country has its elite institution, and everyone has biases about who went where, and everywhere talented people who didn't go to the right schools or have the right jobs get overlooked. When you're scaling internationally, scrappers often adapt faster because they're already used to navigating unfamiliar systems and going out without established playbook and making do with what's available. And that's what international expansion actually requires. They can translate their skills across loads of different contexts and they don't need everything spelled out. They thrive in ambiguity. When you're trying to build something new in a market where nothing is established yet, that scrapper is the person that's going to help you through. Hartley's talk is positive and uplifting. She makes hiring scrappers sound like the obviously right choice, morally and ethically, and it is. But this is why we don't do it more often. If you're a founder or a hiring manager who's never had to scrabble, who's never had been the outsider, who's never had to prove yourself against skepticism or naysayers, you won't recognise a scrapper's value because you've never needed those skills yourself. Their achievements won't look impressive to you because you don't understand what it took to achieve them. This is where homogenous leadership teams create homogenous workforces. If everyone making hiring decisions has followed a similar path, they'll just hire people who followed similar paths. It's not conscious bias, it's just pattern matching at work. And breaking that pattern requires someone in the room who understands what you're missing. Someone who says, this person's CV looks messy because they've been navigating obstacles we've never faced. But that messiness is an evidence of capability, not a lack of it. And that's often a scrapper who's made it through, like myself, and now in the position to open doors for others. So how do you actually hire more scrappers? Because while inspiration is nice, implementation is what matters. So start with your job descriptions. Are you requiring degrees for roles that actually degrees are not necessary? Are you asking for X amount of years of experience at a top tier company when what you really need is someone who can just do the job and do it well? Cut the credential requirements that don't correlate with performance. Change your resume, CV screening process. Instead of filtering for pedigree, filter for evidence of progression and problem solving. Look for people who've grown into their roles, taken on new challenges, figured things out. That matters more than the first job title or the college that they've studied at. Restructure your interviews. Add questions specifically designed to surface resilience and resourcefulness. Tell me about a time you had to achieve something significant with very little resources. When have you had to learn something completely new with no formal training? Describe a situation where conventional approaches didn't work and you had to get creative. Train your interviewers. Most people don't know what they're looking for in a scrapper because they're used to evaluating silver spoons. You need to teach them how to recognize capability that doesn't come in traditional packages. This isn't something that people naturally know. It has to be learned. Implement structured hiring. Use the same questions for every candidate. Score against the same rubric instead of this person feels right decision that favors familiarity over capability, and create pathways for people to prove themselves. If someone's background raises questions but their interview impresses you, consider trial, probation, projects. Let them show what they can do rather than making that binary decision based on credentials alone. Hartley talks about this from a fairness perspective, and yes, it's fairer, but from a business perspective, when you hire scrappers, you get people who don't need perfect conditions to perform. They're used to figuring things out. They're comfortable with ambiguity. They don't expect someone to solve their problems for them. And in a startup environment where resources are always constrained and plans are always changing, those qualities matter more than the prestigious education. You also get different perspectives. People who've navigated different systems see problems differently. They spot opportunities others miss. They question assumptions that everyone else takes for granted. That diversity of thought is what leads to innovation, not just diversity of background. And you get loyalty. When you give someone an opportunity that they weren't expecting, when you see the potential that others have overlooked, you create deep commitment. Scrappers who break through don't take it for granted, believe me. They remember who opened the door, and that matters when you're trying to retain great people in a competitive market. So I wanted to say thank you to that leader who took a chance on me. He knows who he is. He's the reason why I'm here today, why FlightHR actually exists. And now I'm in the position to do the same for others. And I have been for a number of years. And when I'm helping founders build their teams, I push them to look beyond the obvious candidates, not because it's charitable, but because it's smart business. The next time you're looking at two resumes, CVs, side by side, one polished and perfect and one that's messy and unconventional, remember the perfect CV tells you of someone that's had advantages. The messy one might tell you of someone that has capabilities. And Hartley's right. The best hire often isn't the person with the perfect resume. It's someone that's learned how to succeed when they didn't have the chances for success. And I think those are people that you need to bring into your teams because times do get hard and scrappers have already handled that.